Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Iggy and the Stooges record, Ready to Die. Iggy and the Stooges, Detroit-based band, Iggy Pop, frontman, one of rock music's original badasses. The band has 3 seminal records under their belts. They are bloody, they're dirty, they're filthy, The band lived fast, and their very abrupt breakup in the mid-70s reflected that. Because for their time, there was very little about their brand of rock music that felt civilized. And I would say that this energy that the band would put into their music really paid off in some long-term dividends, because just the guts that they laid out in their records like Raw Power and Funhouse have withstood the test of time and feel just as high octane today as I'm sure they did back then. After the demise of the band, there were some post-Stooges musical projects to take note of that were pretty great, like Ron Asheton's Destroy All Monsters. And Iggy Pop as well had a pretty successful solo career with a handful of great records. He mellowed out a little bit musically, but not in a bad way. He put out some interesting post-punk stuff, some art rock stuff. He got a little more adventurous past his Stooges material and put out quite a few records in the 80s and 90s. But the 2000s saw the Stooges actually reforming for live performances, with Mike Watt from the Minutemen playing bass. And this performing and the band's popularity just kind of getting going again led to the result of a new studio album, the band's first studio album in decades, The Weirdness, in 2007. Steve Albini produced it, and in my opinion, this record easily one of the most tragic studio recording comebacks a band has ever made. I mean, literally so tragic that the band and its label literally omitted the existence of this album out from the press release for this new LP, saying that this album is like a direct release after Raw Power. Really, the raw power on The Weirdness was gone. The band's intensity was just replaced with very terrible lyrics. My idea of fun is killing everyone. And these lyrics were delivered with vocals that really lacked ferocity. And the guitars really kind of lacked ferocity too, just didn't have the guts that they used to back in the day. To me, there was just a certain tameness to their new sound on this record. The Stooges were sounding like the groomed and commodified version of what wild rock music is sold as today, as opposed to what it was when the Stooges were playing it. Now with this latest record, Ready to Die, which unfortunately comes after the passing of Ron Asheton, we have round 2, essentially, of this comeback. And I have to say, admittedly, the Stooges are sounding a little gutsier than they did on their previous full length. They aren't completely missing the mark. The band still has their very garagey sound. Songs like Dirty Deal have a very fast, energetic riff, pretty solid solo as well. But that desperation, that just being pushed to the edge feel of the Stooges' music is just still not on this record. It's still not on this recording. I mean, I can't express, I can't put it into words, just that feeling of like, my life depends on this music existing. That vibe is not on here. For sure, this record is not really an insult to their legacy in the way that The Weirdness was, but essentially you're just getting a lot of wild garage rock tracks here that do not feel that wild. And a few of them, especially tracks like Beat That Guy, that experiment with strings and background vocals, venture into territory that has never really been the Stooges' strong point, so I'm just wondering why they're even going down this road to begin with. There are some tracks on here that have lyrics that make me cry and cringe, like the song Job. I got a job and it don't pay shit. There are just some moments where Iggy Pop's words just are too obnoxious for words, to be completely honest, and his voice, it's like him and the band aren't really worried about how it sounds at all, whether or not it's just underwhelming during a point that is, I guess, shooting for something high energy, or just warbling really awkwardly, or just off pitch on some of the moments where it seems like the band is pulling together something a little more ballad-like. I do think the guitars overall on this album are better. They're more ferocious, it's more gnash teeth, it's just showing those canines. And as far as guitars and drums locking together and making a groove, just making a tough-ass vibe, songs like Dee Dee's Dirty Deal or Ready to Die, these songs really have their stuff together. And the song Gun 2 is pretty good as far as guitars and drums go, but there's so many tracks on this album I feel like would have gone over so much better if Iggy's vocals weren't so just flat. Overall, I did think this album was a step up from the Weirdness. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that I enjoyed it. Though there were some bright spots coming out of the guitars and the drums together, I didn't really care for the vocals on not a single song. There were some tracks that I didn't really care for the mix either, where it felt like the guitars were turned up so high I couldn't really appreciate much of anything else in the mix. And like I mentioned toward the beginning of this review, there were songs on here where it seemed like Iggy and the Stooges were experimenting with some softer ideas that I just don't really think went over all that well. I'm really feeling a light to decent 4 on this thing. If you've given it a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Anthony Fantano, Iggy and the Stooges, forever.